Okay, so we have officially finished my Mina from Kaiju 8 cosplay contest competition piece. Um, and that is super exciting. But there's one more thing that I have to do in order to be ready for submissions to the contest, and that is to make my build book. Build books are an interesting thing. There's not like a Word document you can pull up that's like a form where you drop all of your information in and you create a build book. Build books are generally up to the creator to decide what you want to go in there and how you wish to present your work. Build books can be as simple as just a Word document where you dump pictures and descriptions in, or it can be as elaborate as I've seen some made in Shutterfly with like elaborate graphics and things and printed on like actual pages of a book. I tend to go kind of in between the two. I personally enjoy making something that is a little bit more visually interesting than just dropping everything into a Word document, but I'm also not willing to go to Shutterfly or any kind of like printed book situation in order to get that done. I'm not a master level competitor yet, and honestly, I just don't see the point of making an official book out of it. People might hold on to that. I just don't. For me, it's the one-time submission, and we're good to go. So what I end up doing is I go into Google Slides, or you can get a PowerPoint of some sort, and I make it into a PowerPoint, and then I will print those slides on paper, and then use a 3-ring notebook or a small little like folio file in order to hold all of the papers in. And then I'll just drop my printed papers into like paper protectors and call it a day. As far as what I put into my books, I generally try to include a side-by-side at the top of my slide that's titled with the part that I've made, a close-up image of the original character part next to an image of my completed portion. And then down on the left, and this is for all of them because I'm not creative enough to come up with interesting slide layouts for every single page. I'm busy building my costume. So then on the other side of the page, we have a description of everything that was put into that piece. If I was a used car salesman, this would be, I am selling you on those features, right? We are talking about, I made my own patterns. I designed my own 3D print files. I sanded. I painted. I used this technique and that technique, and I am selling this to you like I am trying to sell milk to a cow. Like we are trying to list all of the possible great things that I have done. Will it all get read? I have no idea. I have no idea how much the judges are going to get into the reading of that, but I want that information available to them in the event that they do decide to read my build book. So then I have that description there, and then across the bottom are going to be my progress photos. I do want to show that I physically made this. I'm proud of it. I spent hours and hours and months of time working on this. I am proud of my work, and I want to show you how hands-on I was throughout this entire process. I also want to include, as much as possible, all of my detailed information for me personally, because I run this account, I run a TikTok account, I run an Instagram account. I want you to be able to find me, because if you find me, you will also find my entire process. You will see that costume in action, and if they happen to go there, awesome. That is more information that they can pull from to help understand my entire building process. The other thing I like to include, and I've only seen this once or twice on other build books, is the last page of my build book is a materials page. And I just make a quick little table in the slideshow. I make a quick little table in the slideshow, and I will list what the use of that material was, what the material was itself. Like if I have a chiffon, I say chiffon fabric used for maybe the draping layer on the garment. If I have like the leather for my pouches, for Mina, I'll say self-dyed leather, and then I'll have little swatches right next to all of these descriptions in the table of the different parts of it, so that they can then see and remember, oh, all of these different materials were used. And part of the reason I do that is because stretch materials can be more tricky to use than a cotton. A leather can be a completely different skill to use, and putting that in there reminds them, yes, I literally did that leather work. So having those like material descriptions is very helpful, at least in my opinion, to helping them understand the build process. So here we are. We're actually going to go through my build book, and I will show you what my build book for my Mina Ashura looks like. And then hopefully, because I have yet to compete in it, we will have a good result now that my competition piece is over. So this is the opening page for my book. This is going to go on the cover of my 3-ring binder. I'm just going to print these out and slip them into the 3-ring notebook once I have gotten everything situated the way that I wanted to and I'm ready to print. You can see here on the front, I have my name, Cosplay by Artificer Jen, and then where you can find me, I am always at Artificer Jen. And then I clearly point on here that this is the character that I'm working on with a good side-by-side of the finished product for both of them, right? I wanted them to kind of get like that first main impression of this is the whole thing, everything is completed, and put it right next to an entire view of the original source material costume. So this is the basic page that I would have for pretty much all of my pieces. I'm going to over here say, what is this like the main part that we are looking at here? What is the main piece that we are focusing on this page? And then down here, I give a quick little blurb as to what all went into this. Because obviously, especially since this is a black suit, you might not be able to see all of the details that are in the suit in this one overarching picture. You can only put so many detail shots in, so by mentioning in here all of the different techniques used, I am letting them know that, hey, this is all stuff that I did that you might not be able to see in this overview picture. I mention that I have pin tucks, which you can hardly see at all. They're actually right here in the front of the thigh and actually a little bit under my boots. I did piping, which is with EL wire. That's this part that goes here and at the waist. Piecework. Each one of these are individual pieces of pattern in between the lights. Zipper closure. In the inner support structure, you don't see in here, I actually have a rig inside of the suit to hold all of my armor pieces up so that they don't drag on the stretch garment. Partially lined. Obviously you can't see the lining in the finished project. We also include hand-stitched gusseted gloves. The gloves aren't going to get their own page, so I do need to include them in this power suit. And then vinyl covered EVA bracers, that's this part here. So there's EVA foam underneath this vinyl coating on the outside. And so when I am thinking about these parts, I try to, and a lot of cosplayers will do this, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, the entire thing. So I go through the suit and I think about top to bottom. Okay, here at the neckline, what did I do? Well, that's self-patterned. Is that already mentioned? Yes, I was self-patterned. Going down, I have my leather pieces. That actually gets its own page, all of my leather stuff, so I don't need to mention it here on this page. Going down, oh, I have my EL wire accents here at the waist. Those aren't going to be mentioned in any other part of this. I need to include that over here in my description. Continuing down, the belt, those are 3D printed parts. This is just a vinyl belt. It's not super exciting, so I don't feel like I need to include that. Going down again, then I go, oh wait, here are my pin tucks. I need to include that. Again, going down, oh, these are leather pieces which will be included later in one of my other slides. And then working my way down, these are the boots. They get their own slides as well. So just going top to bottom, kind of itemizing each thing that you did to include that in your description over here. So here was the next slide here. The 3D printing process. The important part about this whole situation is that I did this whole thing. So when I'm making my progress photos, I kind of wanted to hit the main steps of my process, right? I did list here all the different parts that were 3D printed, and then I listed all of the different steps that I used to get there, since they're all kind of the same technique.
I do want to outline that technique, which is different than in the previous one where we talked about all the different techniques used in one item. This is all one technique, but it is a very long and complicated process, so I wanted to outline here how we got there. Also, I did throw in the LED lighting that went on there because that didn't really fit in anywhere else on the process, so I did add in that. But then we have the main steps here of how I got through that entire process instead of maybe a progress on the individual pieces like we did on the power suit. Here it's just one continual process for a kind of united single purpose. And that's the kind of difference between certain parts of your progress photo situation, because essentially some pieces are going to be large, complicated pieces like the suit was here that included lots of different techniques, and you want to include all of those different techniques. And some are going to be one type of technique, but it is a big technique and it is a big piece. So you have to go through the elaborate process through which it takes to get there. So it is slightly different how you want to present the different parts of it, but you do have to think about how are each of my different pieces unique from each other, and how do I need to present that differently in a more thorough light. So then we move on to the leather accessories, and this is much like the 3D printed parts, where it's all the same technique for all of my different parts. They all went through the same wet forming, dyeing, and stitching process. But because it is a long, complicated technique, I need to outline again all of the different steps along the way that brought me to that finished product. The hip cannon is definitely the most difficult part for me to address in this build book. The reason being is it was a very long and very difficult and very complicated process involving so many techniques. And I tried to list here all of the different things that went on inside of that, and sometimes you get to this point where when you're building a build book and you're trying to quickly state all of the parts and pieces and trial and error that you went through to get to that point, but you also need to make it not a novel, right? This is not their reading material for the next 6 months, right? So coming up with a succinct way to talk about all of the different parts and techniques can be difficult. I needed to include just how large this cannon was, because creating a structure for something that large is a skill in and of itself. I needed to include my materials, because the materials themselves are going to require different types of techniques and painting and treatment in order to work together as a cohesive body. I also needed to include the different techniques that I put in there. I used carbon fiber, I used foam, I used EVA foam, I used airbrush, I did hand painting, I did Cricut vinyl decals, I have LED lights, I have PVC and recyclables, just pretty much a weird, crazy hodgepodge of materials and techniques, and trying to include all of that was difficult, but I think we got there, and hopefully it is understandable to the judges. Then we move on to boots. Boots are pretty straightforward. They are just boot covers, but they do need to have their own separate thing because they weren't part of anything else. So I have progress photos. And again, we're following the same kind of layout as the other slides before. We have our title, we have a short description, and then we have our side-by-side here of what the original looks like versus what I ended up making, and our progress photos. And then here's the wig. This one, interestingly, I did include different views of the wig for both myself and for the original. Sometimes having a roundabout view of something is helpful. Things I was pretty proud of was the hairline down at the bottom. I wanted them to be able to see the hairline as well as like the clean execution and shape of the wig. So I did include multiple views of that. And then again, everything else is pretty much the same as all of my other pages. And again, then we move on to the tearaway formal jacket, following the same layout as before, including all of my different techniques. In this one, because I like to be very open and honest about the way that I present my work, I did include the Vogue pattern that I used as a reference for this, because I haven't ever really made coats before, so I needed to have something to help me visualize how to pattern this coat. So I did include in here my Vogue pattern reference, just so that I'm really straightforward and I'm like telling them that, hey, I did self-pattern most of this, but I did get some help from this original pattern. Because you don't want anyone to find out, oh, well, you didn't say that, you didn't do this 100%. Like, I don't want to be accused of having cheated on this. So I'm going to be really open and honest about what I put in my build book and when I am presenting myself to judges. And then last page, and we talked about this earlier, are my material swatches. And again, it is, like I said, just a simple table. I try to be as descriptive as I can with the type of fabric and then where it is being used. So the name here is actually what is on the fabric description, because I did order fabric swatches from Fabric Wholesale Direct. So that's what's on their fabric swatch. Same with this black Sicilian. Now, the gold satin I just picked up at the craft store. The cream vinyl I was gifted from a friend, so I have no information on that except for it's vinyl and it's a cream color. Gray satin, again, I picked that up at the hobby store. And the leather is just leather except for I dyed it. And then again, black mesh I picked up at a store. So I didn't have as much description on some of these as I did on these first two, which I had swatches and detailed information on. But each one has a description of the fabric and where it was, all the way down to the leather and the black mesh. And then what I'll do once I have printed everything out and put it in my book, this like square here, I'll just copy that size with my piece of fabric and glue it or tape it or whatever into the square here, so that when they're looking at the fabric materials, they can side by side see where each one was used.
So this is the finished product for my build book. Like I said before, I don't go as over the top as maybe like a Shutterfly book, but I'm also not going to come with like a stapled little packet of pictures, because I actually do hold on to these. They're kind of like, I don't know, like a record of all of the cool things I've done over time, right? I've got several of these books now, and I kind of want to keep them as keepsakes. So I do want them to be more than just a little packet, but I'm not going to put the money or the time and effort into making a full-on Shutterfly book for them. So again, this is just, I don't know, like a 1-inch 3-ring binder, and then I've printed off my images, and since we've already reviewed them, they're just here in the paper protectors. I like mine horizontal. I feel like my pictures fit in better this way. A couple of my older ones I did have like vertically oriented, but I do prefer the horizontal orientation on my build books. And this is it. This is what I do for my build book, and I am now ready. All of my pieces are finished, and my build book is done, and we are ready to go. This is also, as a side note, these are all my little swatches of my materials, and that's what that page ends up looking like in the end. But here we are, ready to go compete.